Good day and welcome to Conversatio, the program that deals with the way, a way of life. We've had issues on healthcare, racism, empowerment for females, crime, politics, finances. Today, we're going to be dealing with the issue of social justice. We have with us, today we're filming at the Walk in the Light Church, which also serves as a center. We're right in the shadows of both the state government and the city government. We're in a space where a number of the politicians and powers that be are been recognized by this very church. Some of the people that we look to appeal to and for our issue today. We have with us today Miss Lillie Holliday, who is the mother of Omar Thornton, and we have Joanna Iovino, who is a writer and publisher of Heart Monitor here in the city. Today, we'd like to take an opportunity to appeal to everyone because the issue deals around with Miss Holliday's son, Omar Thornton, who, God rest his soul, was a part of a tragedy that was experienced almost 2 years ago now, in 2010, at the Budweiser Distribution Center in Manchester. We'd like to give Omar's mother an opportunity to have brought out some of her son's thoughts and her son's position, as opposed to what is generally in the newspapers here, in the media, of him being a killer, which is not necessarily the case. That opinion hasn't been nearly supported as well as it's most recently been supported by Ms. Iovino in her recent article in the Heart Monitor, which is available for your discernment. I'd like to start this out with, a prayer, because it's very important that we arrive at the truth and love, and is within the context of mercy also. So I'd just like to take a moment to pray that however this session goes, it goes in such a way that truth and light and love will be an end product. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done as in earth as is in heaven. And give us this day our bread, our daily bread. And forgive us of our debts as we forgive our debtors. Deliver us from temptation and evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. I may have messed up, but I'm not exactly a reverend.
It's okay. It's okay.
Just a little side note. I really remember the day, specifically that morning, and my point of reference is that someone had came to Access TV's offices, a member of the NAACP that morning, and he was interested in creating a vehicle for the African American community to do like hard news. And he was talking with us, and we were trying to figure out how we were going to get the support necessary to raise the money to just even produce such a show. So we're talking about 8, 9 o'clock in the morning, and we're having this meeting. Before the meeting ended, and we got the news of what had happened in Manchester, and we were kind of like befuddled, and we were saying, we had a little synopsis of what had happened. Basically, someone had got caught stealing, and they went to the meeting, and then just, well, hell broke loose. And we're saying to ourselves, no, what kind of pressure, what kind of stress would have caused someone to do that? And we didn't know. And of course, in order for it to be developed, then we needed someone who was going to do the hard news from the African American standpoint of view, which is sorely lacking here. So, an investigation without somebody pointing the investigators in any particular direction is a one-sided investigation, which hopefully is not the way it turned out, but we'll see, and we'll get the opinions of the two young ladies here. With that in mind, your thoughts on the investigation?
Speaking on the investigation, my thoughts are the investigation is just like what happened to him, the reason why he lost his life. He had no peers of his own. He had no one that listened to him. He felt that the union was working against him because they didn't pay attention to anything that he said to them. And the investigation that happened, it happened pretty much the same way, with no people of color to be really supervising what's going on or letting me know anything. It was like the same type of investigation was going on. It's like the same type of thing that happened to him that made him lost his life. Because while he was going through the situation, he was complaining, but nobody was listening and nobody was paying attention to him. He even said to me the union that he was paying money to was not helping him, and he believed that the union was actually kin to the people, to the company that he was working for, which was the Hartford Distributors. So he was very stressed out, and it was every day that they did something different. The people that he was working with did something to him different to make him even more stressed out. Even when the man hit him on the back of his leg with a crayon, one of those, I guess you call it a crayon that you drive, a forklift or whatever, and hit him in the back of the leg. Then he complained about it, but then the next day when he came back to work, the man was sitting there laughing like nothing was done. So he just felt like he was cornered and he didn't have a way out. And the investigation that they did, I'm feeling like I'm cornered in this because they're coming back and saying there's no racism, there's nothing found that proven by Omar Sharif Thornton, which is my son. And I'm like, how do you get there when you got President Barack Obama with the noose around his neck in the bathroom? You got them admitting that they call him Slomar when his name is Omar. If you ask me, that's a lot of abuse. The treatment is bad, and he went through a lot of different things. He was profiled. He was racially profiled. He was bullied. He had a whole bunch of different issues that he was dealing with, enough to push him over the edge.
Let me read, if I can, from the editorial that I personally did. And I was just going on information from what was initially reported. And what stuck out to me is a point that Ms. Holliday just had made. There was a relationship between the management and the union.
And the union, yes.
Okay.
He said to me he believed that some of the union was actually family to the people that owned the company. And nothing that he was saying was getting through. Like when they came out and said, oh, we have no written statements of nothing. Well, that's to be expected if you have all the opportunities to do whatever you feel like doing. But if you have a person, they call them Slomar, if you have a person that is very slow on a job and not getting the job done, that would be reason enough to fire him, I believe. And then they had one point where they said, well, he was sleeping on the job. Well, if you got a person that's not doing the job and sleeping on the job, why wouldn't you fire them? What else would you need to get rid of the person?
Let me continue on with reading from this editorial. There would be a need for an editorial approach and a perspective that would generate understanding. The proper story could serve as a public grief counseling, so to speak. Who can we turn to for understanding when the dead are dead? Perhaps that same cry, who can I turn to, was the issue for Omar Thornton while he was alive. Our collective thoughts on early Tuesday morning concern what kind of stress-related idiocy had caused this horrible loss of life. Less than 24 hours later, after the questioning of Thornton's loved one, the killing's reason became an issue of race and representation. From a mother and a girlfriend, we were told that Omar's dilemma was prejudicial treatment and racist practices in the workplace. We now begin to question the ability of a union to represent a minority member and that union's very relationship to the Hartford Independent Budweiser Distributors Management. Whom did Thornton think he could turn to? Could he turn to the law, the same employment laws that most people are totally ignorant of? Could he turn to the police? In many cases, in-house racist hijinks are not illegal. Often it is said that those perpetrators are considered to be just having a little fun. Now, this is while being aware of personally what your son had gone through. And I followed this up by looking at the union had a website,
Okay.
lowercase Facebook, where you could kind of come in and voice your grievances and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And what stuck with me is that there was a couple of people who were complaining, and someone else said, well, you're like wasting your time complaining. This is all in this format. So I was just wondering whether or not your son had ever tried to write in and communicate his problems, openly in that particular venue, which is this website.
I'm not aware of him writing to that website at any given time, but I do know that he was complaining about different situations and he was telling them different things, and I do know that whenever he complained about whatever he was complaining about, they didn't pay it any attention, and he got very frustrated with that. And I know that when he started working for that company, he was supposed to be driving for them, and they put him into a shipping or receiving or packing or something department, and it took him over a year to actually get the position that they hired him for. And they started writing letters to the company, him and his girlfriend, so that they could actually give him the job that they hired him for. And that was very stressful also.
Now, Joanne, getting back to the concept of who could he turn to, what's your opinion of that?
I think that when it comes to racist environments at work, there's not a lot that is done because people they say, oh, well, we need proof, we need proof, we need proof. And then when there is proof, they bury the proof. Like, for example, it took the police, 12 months to look at Omar's phone and say, oh, we didn't find any racist graffiti on his phone, but during that 12 months, what could they have done with the evidence? But a lot of times in these environments, it's just a general culture, just a hostile environment. And that's something that you can't necessarily prove on paper because you can't take a picture of a hostile environment. You can't record hostile words that you could feel that it's hostile. You could feel that it's happening, but it's not something that's written down in policy, so you can't point to it and say, well, this is what's going on. And then when you bring your grievances to the company or to the union or to the law, they say, well, show us proof.
Right.
How could you prove just general hostility coming from your coworkers? It's very difficult to do. So I think that I have this newsletter, which is the Heart Monitor, and this is something that I'm trying to do, is get people from the community to be able to express the kinds of things that are happening out there, the kinds of activities that are going on, but then also the kinds of activism that's going on to attack these type of things. And it comes from a lot of different perspectives. And I mean, I wrote a story about Omar. That was my words. That was my story. Any story in the newsletter is written from the perspective of that person. But it's really a community newsletter where different perspectives from the most conservative to the most radical regarding racial justice issues are able to be expressed. So I'm hoping that that can contribute to.
Well, what are your thoughts about the union, especially, is that a union part of the Teamsters at all?
Yes, that was the Teamsters Union.
That's a pretty rough customers. I mean, a lot of times I believe in that you should kind of know, like, where you're at, what ball field you're playing in. Okay. And we're talking about truckers, some rough customers. Now, for someone to be threatened in in such an environment and not react.
When you're at your limit and you make a decision that Omar made, I know that he did everything that he could possibly do to get them to pay attention to him. You don't make that decision and don't try to get help and don't try to get anybody to listen to you.
Well, let me ask you this. This whole concept of him bringing a gun to work, that might not be such a big deal. I would assume that a number of other truckers also carried guns because of, they're being, at risk, in their deliveries. So, I mean, it seems as though, like, he just purposely just went in there with a gun and just came in there firing.
I don't know, for me to answer that for you, I believe that when Omar came to work that day, he had had enough. And he had reached out and everywhere that he believed that he could have to try to get help. And I believe he was at a point where he was hurt and he was in a lot of pain and he didn't want to suffer anymore and he didn't want them to be able to hurt anyone else. And I believe in his mind he had already made up that he was going to be the sacrifice, because if he did what he did, he knew that he wouldn't want to live anymore himself.
Was he going to make a statement? Was he going to bring out about the conditions there? Was he going to be perhaps accused of being a snitch?
I don't know what you
Was he
mean.
in that position? Well, here's these things going on that were, to say, terrible things for anybody to endure, and obviously he thought that Mansfield was allowing it to continue. Okay, was he going to make any type of public statement like, here's what's going on?
Well, that's what he did. To my understanding, Omar was fed up. He could not get no help. He felt he was caged in. He felt that they was not paying him any attention, and it didn't matter what he said. He was the only one that they were singling out everything that he did. They would say, oh, you can't do this, you did that, or whatever. It made little things big things. And he was at his end. He just couldn't take it anymore. And every time he would reach to them to do something, they did nothing.
I get the feeling, Joanna, in your recent article, that you're looking upon Omar as kind of a hero. Why so?
Because if he had just made a public statement in the news, it would have gotten worse. The situation would have gotten worse. People would have denied, and people have been talking about racism for hundreds of years. Omar did something about it. So yes, I do see him as something of a hero, yes.
Mother, are you comfortable with that?
Under the circumstances, I have to say I feel the same way, because he was he was cornered, and he felt like what he did would stop them from hurting him and from having the opportunity to hurt anyone else. That's what was in his mind at the time when it happened. That's what he said on the 911 call. He said, "Mom, I killed the 5 most racist people." So this is what he felt in his mind and in his heart, and I believe that, yes.
With that said, I don't know whether or not each one of those people who died, other than your son, were in fact, racist, or whether or not they were 5 were racist and 2 weren't, or whatever have you. But considering their deaths, what do you say to the families? What the message that they should get out of this?
To my understanding, there was a lot of them upset because I'm doing what I'm doing, and I was trying to figure out why, because at the end of the day, we need to get to the bottom of what really happened. Omar didn't just went randomly and started shooting a lot of people and started just killing people. He actually looked for the people that this happened to. So that being said, something went wrong. Something happened, and everyone should be trying to get to the bottom of it and find out what really happened, rather than saying, "I'm angry and I'm upset, I'm hurt, and I'm in pain, but I want to know what happened to my child, what really pushed them over the edge." I know something went wrong, and according to him, it was racism, and I believe it was racism that pushed him over the edge.
Could it also have been like fear for his own personal well-being? I write that basically, I'm saying, to paraphrase it, that he was expecting a showdown.
If you're being bullied, if you're being disrespected, you're being called out your name, there's nuisance in the bathroom, what kind of mind do you think you would have? And all of the people that you're working with, none of them are people of color that are your peers, so what would you think? That's a hostile situation to be in. Even if the people were all very good and nice, it would still be a little tense for anyone to be in that situation.
Just bring it straight down in front, Could he have been scared of the union?
What I believe that happened, I don't believe he was scared of the union.
Yes.
I believe that the union had showed him no respect and did nothing that they were supposed to do, because he said to me, he says, "I pay them the money that I pay them like I'm supposed to, but they're not doing anything for me." So I don't think he had a fear of them. I think he just wanted them to do what they're supposed to be doing for him as a union. Because he was excited. He was like, "Oh, I have a union I'm working for. This is good." And then it turned out not to be good.
So he was more concerned with him dropping the ball.
Excuse me?
He was more concerned with them dropping the ball so far as their responsibilities.
Well, they did. They let him down. He would tell me that they were just taking his money, but they weren't doing anything for him. So they did. They let him down. The union, the company, they let him down.
Could that be a point, or Joanna, could that be a point so far as the union letting down? Could the union have also let down the families of these other co-workers who died by allowing these practices? Not only did they fail Omar, they failed the rest of their constituents.
I have actually said that before, that if the families think that anybody should be held responsible, it should be the company. Because a lot of these people who were killed were working for the company 20, 30 years. You can't tell me that during that time, they did not show themselves to be racist. There were racist jokes going on. As a matter of fact, I believe that one of the employees who had been there for about 15, 20 years had been suspended at one point in time for telling racist jokes on the job. So if someone's been there for 15, 20 years and finally gets suspended And I believe this was before Omar started working there. But that's all that happens, is a couple of days suspension. Then you know that this has been going on. This is part of their corporate culture for a long time. And I think that there are certain, I don't know a lot about unions, but I think there are certain political aspects to that where certain people have power with the unions and certain people don't have power. And the fact that these men were 20, 30-year employees and Omar was new, I'm sure had something to do with that as well.
Could that union have been dominated by a certain society, shall we say, to put it nicely?
I don't
You feel
know.
that way?
I don't know enough about unions, but I do know.
Well, I'm
that-
literally talking about, like, the mob.
Well, the union was an all-white union, I believe.
Oh, why is it kind of broad, you know?
Well,
But
I
I
don't
was
know.
saying specifically it could have been a mob-controlled
I don't
truckers
know.
union
I don't know. I just,
dominated by Italians.
I just know that.
Joanna?
I just know that they didn't do what they're supposed to.
And I know if you look at the history of unions,
Uh-huh.
unions were set up to protect white employees. The original intent of unions was to help white employees keep their jobs when they saw black people invading into their jobs. Then all of a sudden, well, let's unionize so we can make sure that our white employees keep their jobs, our Italian employees, our Irish employees. And so I think if you look at the history of unions,
That's very, very interesting.
definitely
Yeah.
something that is part of that, because unions were set up to protect white people.
Not so employee rights.
Oh, no.
Well, I feel that one lesson that could be learned from this, and I personally, I don't believe in racism. I think about prejudice, I think about discrimination, bias, whatever have you. But this thing about your race, because we're all one race, you know, so this white-black thing is, but just the practice of being selective or treating somebody unfairly in a work situation, a social situation, that can happen regardless. That can happen like in a church,
Yeah,
an
that's why.
organization. It can happen in a family. This prejudice
But
in your
this-
family.
But this is
Yeah.
called, this is institutional racism, which is a racism that's done on the job. And most of the time, it's never talked about, this type of racism. Nobody really talk about institutional racism because they're afraid they're gonna lose their jobs and, you know, they don't know what they're gonna do. So it's a type of racism to really stress out a person, because you're there, you want to complain, you want to tell them what's going on, and the more you tell them what's going on, that's the more hostile they get towards you, and the more they find reasons to get rid of you, so people don't want to talk about it. And it brings on high blood pressure, heart attacks, and it makes a lot of sickness develop because the body can only handle so much. And it comes from being stressed, and stress makes you depressed and brings on situations like I have with my son.
Could you see that? The physical manifestations?
I could see the change in him. I could see the change in him slowly from the time he started working at that company. He was excited, he was happy, he was like, there's a union here, and you know, they pay good, and it's gonna be okay. That's what he thought. And then after being there for so many months of them telling him he was being hired to originally drive, and then they not give him the driving position, and he was in a shipping, and then for so many months he was there until he started writing letters to them, him and his girlfriend, to try to get the job that
So
they
excuse
originally
me,
hired him
he
for.
was hot. I thought that he just pushed his way up.
No, you didn't push
So
his
he was
way up.
hired
He went there
as
with
a
the Class
driver.
A tractor trailer license. He was hired as a driver. They just refused to give him that position for about a year, or over a year actually, because I think he was only driving for like 6 months. So he was there for like 2 years, so he must have was in the shipping, receiving for about a year and a half before they actually give him the position that he
So he was
was
fighting
hired
for
for.
what was due.
He was fighting for what was due. That's what made him so stressed, and the union didn't help him. That's why he was telling me that they weren't helping him, because him and his girlfriend started writing letters to the company to ask for the position that they originally hired him for. It took them, I believe, a year and a half before they allowed him to become a driver. He understood the union quite well. He had his own business at one point. He had been driving from state to state for...
So he was a businessman.
Yes, he knew, he understood. He had people that worked for him. He understood the union. He understood work ethics. That was not a problem for him. He was hardworking. I've seen him days that he worked like 15 hours and still get right back up the next morning and go to work. He was hardworking. He worked all of his life. The job that he was doing there, they said, well, he wasn't doing that job right, so we named him Slowmar. That's not his name. His name is Omar Sharif Thornton. He was accustomed to bringing up old freezers out of people's apartments, the old type that was heavy, moving beds and stoves and up on second floors and third floors. That job at the Hartford Distributor was no job for him as far as being hard, whether he was at the bottom of the list or at the top of the list. It was not a problem for him. He was accustomed to hard work all of his life. So when they say we called him Slowmar, I'm like, where did that come from? That's just another thing to abuse him for no reason at all.
I hate to turn this into but so much of a racial issue is a racial
Well, it is.
issue.
When you think about what he went
Was
through.
his girlfriend was,
She was white.
she was white.
Yes.
Did that play into any of his, was he giving grief for the fact that he was
Dating her.
a white
Well,
woman?
at one point, he was feeling like maybe they had a problem with that, too, because he said once she came to the job, then they really started getting more hostile towards him. That's what
Was she
he
as
felt.
adamant as Joanna here? Could that have been a problem?
I don't know, she was...
The white girl
she
wouldn't
was
low
just-
profile.
She was just a real nice person.
Okay.
You know, I liked her. She'd been there from day one, and she wasn't afraid to say that she knew it was racism. And she also said she saw the pictures on his cell phone, and her mom, God rest her mom's soul, her mom passed away in November, I think it was, her mom passed away. But her and her mom speaked up too about Omar and said that they know that racism had a part to do with what happened to him. And then his ex-girlfriend, she talked about it when it happened. So they understood him. You know, they knew that he was a very low-key, calm person. That's why when what happened, because they just didn't think that he would do anything. He would just let it go.
It's really good that the show is being taped in a church, and it's taking us, hopefully, and purposefully, it's taking on a little more of a presentation
Yeah,
of your
that's true.
son's rights, his position, since he can't speak for himself at this point. Hopefully, that's accomplished. So,
And then at the end of the day, they could say that he was stealing or whatever. He doesn't have a record. He's never been arrested. He's never been in any violent crimes or anything like that. The guns that he had his own gun permit. He's had it for like 14 years or so. So that kind of makes me a little irritated when they say, oh, well, he's stealing. I'm like, you're saying he's stealing, but at the same time, there's no arrest records of him at all anywhere. So all the stealing can only be tapes that they made up or tapes that they want to put together or whatever, because I don't even know if they're real tapes or anything. Nobody's said anything to me about it, and I don't know if anything is real.
again, the setting here, I think this is a perfect opportunity for you to make a statement to the public, perhaps the white public, perhaps the public of the people who died say something to them about how you feel about their pain, although their pain cannot be any greater than yours.
You know, ever since this happened, I've always said that I give sympathy to families and, you know, said to them I know that they're hurting and I'm hurting too. But I don't know, it just seems like there is a lot of anger going on, and it's direct towards the fact that I'm having a celebration in honor of my son, because that's my son and that's what I want to do. I still say that we all are hurting and there are no winners in this. I'm not a winner, they're not a winner, we all have a loss. We just need to get to the bottom of it, and we need to make sure that it never happen again, because it can happen again. Racism not only hurt, it kills.
Having made, that statement to those people, and us having established that there's a lot of victims.
Yeah, there is.
They were victims. Omar is a victim.
Yes.
Okay.
We all are victims.
Now, who's the straw that's stirring that drink? Is it the media? And that question is to you, Joanna.
I didn't understand your question.
That's racism.
Mm-hmm.
The racism involved in that particular issue. What stirs this? Is it the media? Is it the lack of equal representation through the media?
It's everything. I mean, from when, as a white person, from when I was this big, you see certain images in the media. You go through an educational system that teaches you that all of the heroes of our country were white people. They'll bring up maybe, Martin Luther King Jr., and that's about it. I was 17 or 18 years old before I ever heard the name Malcolm X, believe it or not, from the educational system. And it just, the system in place doesn't recognize more subtle racism. They'll sit there and say something about, oh, well, this is racist if they hear about a cross burning or some kind of racist graffiti, but they don't see the little everyday things. They don't say anything about the fact that when you watch a police show, almost every time the perpetrator is a person of color. They don't mention anything about that. They don't mention anything about how media images impact kids, how the educational system impacts, how family systems impact. I remember in my own family, I never thought anyone in my family was racist. I really didn't. I had no idea until I started exploring more and finding out more about racism. And I think that once you reach the age of 13, 14 years old, that's your responsibility to start finding out more about this. I remember my own family having a party on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And the party was basically an anti-Martin Luther King Jr. party. And this was for my uncle, who I never thought was a racist person until that day. And I remember seeing a KKK keychain on his door. But I never thought he was racist because he would say, well, you know what, one of my best friends is a black man. So all these subtle things, it becomes a much more subtle thing where you think, well, that person's not racist, they're just making a joke, or that person's not racist, they're just my uncle. So I think the family members of these people probably heard their family members make racist jokes a million times. They've probably been to a million parties, just like I've been, where white people think they could say whatever they want because they think, oh, well, there's only other white people in the room, and they don't realize that sometimes there's someone like me listening in, and I'm going to tell people about this.
Well, not to interrupt, I don't want to belabor because I want to bring this to a close. You talk about KKK. And in my researching, I was impressed about the local branch of the union. What in South Windsor? I think it is in South
Where?
Windsor.
I don't know about the union vote.
Okay.
I mean, I only
Oh.
came to
That
Connecticut
union.
Are you talking about the one
14 months ago.
Yeah, right.
Oh, that
and
was in Manchester.
somehow, but the union's offices.
Oh, I don't know
different.
where they are.
I think it's in South Windsor. And I was struck with, like, that neighborhood that it was in, perhaps at one time having a KKK association. That's just myself. I'd like to say, my point is that trying to empathize with Omar of who could he turn to. We, black people, we have to develop our organizations, okay? Again, I was saying that when it happened, that particular day, the NAACP was at our doors, okay, saying that we got to do something about this, like news coverage, okay? Could Omar turn to the NAACP?
Because they didn't do that with me.
Or it could have been Al Sharpton, the Nation of Islam. Who could he have turned to? Okay. If we're talking about justice, you have to put yourself in a position to do anything. Okay? Until we start supporting our organizations, our black organizations start doing
But
what they need to do.
Can I just add
I
something?
wanted to say something.
Yes,
I think
Lillie?
I think the leaders that we have, I don't know if they're paying attention to situations that are already pretty much done, that they don't really have to fight or they don't really have to defend. They kind of rush to that situation. But with my situation, none of them rushed to it, and they all knew about it. So I needed them as my leaders to come in to try to help see me through this situation, but they haven't did that. But then with the Trayvon Martin, they were all there, and it was a situation that you could just see it. It was all in black and white. You didn't have to do anything to find anything or put anything together or make sense of anything, and they just was not there. So that's we need them to be supportive and be willing to find out what's going on and step up to situations that are different. This is a very different situation. Usually they're used to going after someone of color being injured or hurt or murdered by someone, and this situation is very different. My son is a black African American and these are white people, so it's a different situation, and they all seem to be, we're not going to touch it, we're not going to do anything, and I just don't think that's right. I think they need to step up and they need to help get to the bottom of it. This is a situation that do not need to be swept under the table or forgotten. And I'm not going to forget it. Myself, I will be fighting for justice for my son for the rest of my life.
on that point, and Joanna, I'm going to give you an opportunity to express yourself there. That the continuation of this, I like for our public to realize, again, as Omar's mom has said, that, this is not ended, okay? So that means that there's still things that you as an audience need to bring forth. This particular show can be a vehicle. Again, I would love to have Ms. Holliday back here. And I'd love for anyone of the audience to, quote, look for equal time or to write us regarding this, and perhaps there can be another forum on this particular issue. Joanna?
The point I wanted to make before is a lot of times these mainstream organizations are so focused on nonviolence, that that's all they can see. They could see, he used violence, but to me, that was self-defense. He was being attacked on a regular basis. Psychological violence was what he was going through. So to me, what he did was self-defense. That was not just some random use of violence. This was self-defense. He was being attacked on a regular basis. He was being threatened on a regular basis. He had reason to fear for his safety and for his life because of what these people were doing to him. And I think a lot of organizations won't touch that because they think, oh, well, it's violence, without realizing that this is self-defense. You can't just sit there and lump everything together and say, oh, well, he killed people, so this was murder and this was violence. Whereas if someone had been coming at him with a knife, they would have said, oh, well, that was self-defense.
Yep.
But psychologically, it's just as damaging. It's just as violent. And when you feel threatened like that, that's self-defense as well. So I think that a lot of these mainstream organizations don't want to touch that because they don't see that. They don't make the correlation between psychological violence and self-defense. And I think that's a problem.
I agree.
Well, we're all in agreement, because I
That is a
can't see
problem.
that, Mr. Thornton being a killer.
He's not.
I can see that he's a victim, as well as his supposed victims are, as well as we all are. Thank you very much. Please look for another episode of Conversatio. Thank you for being here.
And thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Very much welcome.